so we're ready to go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 11:01 a.m. on May 13th, 2020. Nat, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. So the first item that I have on my list here is an update from the homeless work group and Alyssa Pruce. And do we have Alyssa on the phone?
Yes, I am here.
Howdy.
Great.
Hi.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi. Well, I guess I wanted to take some questions from you all first, just to see what you know and where I should get started with.
I think it would be really helpful if you just went ahead and gave your role with the homeless work group and kind of an overview of what you guys have been working on for the last month. But I mean, let's keep it like 2-minute overview would be great.
Oh, okay. All right, I can do that. So my name is Alyssa Pruce. I've been contracting with Coos Health and Wellness for over a year now, doing different research projects and whatnot. And so when this all came up, I was tasked with trying to figure out a plan for what to do with, well, it started out as the homeless population sort of evolved into generally unsheltered or people who don't have the ability to isolate or self-quarantine if they need to. So as these plans have been rolling forth, we put together a task force of different community members who offer their input, and a lot of community partners have direct experience with working with the homeless. And then so we've got the Devereaux Center, Don Ford at the Methodist Church. Let's see, there's people from Orca, Waterfall, a number of different organizations. And, of course, the city of Coos Bay, the law enforcement. So we've had input from all these different groups, and we've come up with many different scenarios of how this could play out. So I just sent out a document about 15 minutes ago. I know, sorry for the short notice. But it's sort of a synthesis of what we've come up with thus far. And this is taking into account, and I don't know if everyone's aware of, the budget that we came up with for if we were going to put a bunch of people into a hotel, and it was exorbitantly expensive. So I tried to pivot and figure out how we can viably shelter people who need it without incredible expenses, and then also coming up with how we can pay for these things with different grants and other funding streams. So, I can start with what I've come up with on this document, or I can take questions if there's any questions at this point. No? Okay. So should I keep going?
Please do.
Yes, I think so.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Alyssa.
Okay. All right. So, let's see. We have a protocol in order, and I won't be exhaustive about this, but the one thing that I kept coming back to was okay, there's a difference between people who are unhoused generally and need to self-isolate or self-quarantine, and then people who, for whatever reason, normally have housing but can't self-isolate or self-quarantine. And I was using sort of the narrative in my brain was Betty Lou and Roy, and they're older people, and, Betty Lou tests positive, but Roy doesn't. But they don't have the means to self-isolate or to quarantine from each other. So Betty Lou is provided a hotel room. So this scenario, I don't think is going to happen very often, just because, for one, usually if you're living in such close quarters, you probably both would test positive, and then you can isolate together. And then, and also a lot of people, if they're housed, would have go to a family member's house, the other person go to a family member's house or something. So, so in that scenario, we would house the person. Now, if they're unhoused and they have a number of other problems, then they're going to need enhanced care, you know? So being in a hotel room is not exactly the best option because with all the wraparound services that need to be provided there, it's just not viable. So my idea is to, our idea as a task force is to maybe find a site for camping. There's also been it's been brought to my attention that sheds can be built with the support from SOIB. And so these sheds or temporary housing structures could be placed in on property, or I mean county property would probably be the cheapest. I was thinking the fairgrounds would be a good spot because all the facilities still exist. So that there's bathrooms and showers and there's food, and so when I crunched the numbers, it came out to be that was the least expensive option. And that even includes building the sheds. I also crunched the numbers for doing something at the Armory site, but it's not as large and they don't have facilities. And I even did that just with providing tents for people. And I can give you a breakdown here. Let's see. For the fairgrounds, the initial setup, and this is including the cost of building 12 sheds and 1 month of taking care of people, is $46,446. With the FEMA, and this is be eligible for 75% FEMA reimbursement, and then that's not including staff costs. So if we put staff costs on top of that, we're looking at the total setup is $78,006. And then, so once it's set up, the monthly cost for 70 people in that site would be $51,100. So initially you'd have about $80,000 to get it set up, and then ongoing, and this is supporting 70 people, of $51,000. The Armory, the initial setup is less expensive, but the ongoing costs are more expensive because you don't have the existing facilities, so you have to cart in, the showers on the trailers and lighting and propane and generator and all of those things. And so it ends up driving up the cost to be about $1,354 per individual a month. And and I doubled the food cost too on the Armory because there's no place to prepare food, so we'd have to have everything prepared and brought in. There's some, there are some cons with the fairgrounds idea. I mean, one, bringing that many people into Myrtle Point might not be popular, but I have some ideas about how to mitigate, unsavory behavior, or how to choose people to go into the camp. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Still good.
No? Okay. All right. So as far as testing goes, so I am aware that we need the county needs to test 192 people every week, and so in order to do that, I was thinking, and this helps on a lot of different ways. So at the Methodist Church, there are about 90 people living up there, and they're really, really close quarters. And, you know, I think that if we went up there, if the, you know, public health department went up there and started testing some of those people, and once they're tested, they have to go into isolation. And in order to get people to be tested, because I hear it's incredibly unpleasant, is to maybe provide like a transitional housing voucher. And so once they come out of their isolation, we can maybe, and I have an idea of this too, I didn't provide it in the document, I don't want to get too far into this, but just kind of a brainstorm, so that people coming out of the isolation don't just go back into the camp, but have a safer place to go. And my idea is that people that are going to want transitional housing don't want to be homeless, and they have the cognitive ability to understand that if I do this and I follow the directions and I do all the things and check all the boxes, then I get this thing. So that really narrows down like people's behavior and where their mindset is for who we're putting into this, you know, I think I called it emergency isolation community. And I think that will cut down on, you know, kind of like the behaviors or, you know, things that are associated a lot of the times with homeless population. That's sort of the end point with that. Not the end point, but that's an idea for getting people to get tested. One of my biggest concerns is that someone is going to get tested up at Methodist, and they're not going to, with contact tracing, from what I've heard from John, he's like, you don't even need to do contact tracing. And he's like, I know that they've all been, you know, within very close together. So I'm afraid it's like we're going to get one, and then it's just going to snowball and be, you know, 50 or 60 people, and we're not going to be prepared. But you know, having the fairgrounds, you know, huge, large place that can absorb those kind of numbers. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I know I'm missing stuff. There's just so many moving parts to this whole project. And is everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okay. All right. Okay, and then let's see. So some other options to consider are, you know, any other county properties, obviously. I was thinking maybe the baseball field on Libby Lane, if we wanted to keep it, you know, closer to services. That's the other con about, you know, going all the way out to Myrtle Point is the wraparound services that we have to provide are mostly the ones that I'm planning on are all coming from the Coos Bay North Bend area. So there might be some like extra expenses to get the providers down there. You know, a lot of this is going to be telehealth, but I think with this particular population, like they're going to need some face-to-face time. So let's see here. Yeah, and then I also found another property out on Mill Avenue in Coquille. There's like 3.5 acres for sale out there, and it's zoned industrial. So it seems like that would work out. I haven't done much more research into properties around here. I did try to find a hotel or motel to buy, and on my online research, I couldn't find any that are for sale. So, I mean, maybe we could just start calling and see if there's a mom and pop hotel around that they want to sell and they just haven't put it on the market yet. But as far as what's listed, there's nothing on the market. Let's see. I'm going to just hop into funding real quick here. So there are a number of different federal programs that will support this project in one way or the other. And so funding isn't just like, oh, we're going to get all of this money from FEMA on this one particular thing. It's kind of like we have to, piece it together from all these different government agencies, and I have looked into other just like nonprofit things, so because we can get funding also through the Coos County Friends of Public Health. They can apply for some grants that the county isn't eligible to apply for, and I haven't included that on this document. But I'll just run through a couple of these that are good potential. So if we have any families or children, there's several grants from ACS and Family Violence Prevention Services, Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs, and transitional living programs. There's a community services block grant, and I've got the details on that one. That's a good one. And this one is up to $500,000 for rehabilitation of a community facility, rehabilitation to construct or group living facility. So, we definitely would qualify for that one. And that might be, a win-win. So if you do it on the fairground and you rehabilitate it, you're improving the county property as well. So when it's all said and done, not only did you provide, a place for people who are unsheltered to go, but you also, improve the county facility as well. So let's see. And then we've got TAMPs, so Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and they boosted their funding quite a bit. And so that is, and it's very broad. So this includes a whole host of things that could be helpful. So family support services, energy, housing search and placement. Let's see. And then, there's several different FEMAs. So the one that Patty applied for or submitted a request for is the FEMA PA. And this one's specifically for non-congregate sheltering and support services. And there are other ones. So there's the FEMA IA, and that's for shelter and transitional housing. And so with this transitional housing piece that I'm talking about, and I don't want to go too much, but it kind of makes sense, and we might have funding for it. So if we can get people to take the test, get this transitional housing voucher, Cam at Coos Health and Wellness has been looking into this property on Elrod, and I don't know if we ever got a definitive answer about it, but I imagine that the HVAC system isn't up to par to put people who potentially could be sick in there, but it might be a good facility to put people after they're done being in isolation in order for them to transition into a more permanent housing situation. So, because it seems to me that if we put people back out on the street, they risk the potential of either contracting the virus again. So if there is funding for it, I'm not saying that the county should definitely pay for this, but if there's an opportunity to fund it from a grant, it would be something to do. And so this is a FEMA IA program, and this is helps with supportive services, provision, food, and shelter. And then there's another FEMA IA grant that does crisis counseling, education development, coping skills. Okay, so this one could potentially pay for the peer support. So that's behavioral health, mental, those sorts of things that we have to have in place, especially if we're going to have, the homeless population. Let's see. way more. Okay, and then the HRSA healthcare aid, and this one could support telehealth. So, and I'm not sure, one of these would provide, so you could buy devices. So there's so many details with it. So if you have people in a place, they need to have, telehealth, and not all of them have smartphones. Some of them do. But I would imagine that, and I guess I need to figure this out for sure, that the fairgrounds has Wi-Fi. And so, we could, get a grant to buy, several laptops or inexpensive Chromebooks for everybody, and that way they can do telehealth. Let's see. And then the county would own those afterwards as well, donate them to schools or, let's see. Then still telehealth, and then we have all the HUD grants. So ongoing support for transitional housing and this could be for both emergency shelter and street outreach services. And let's see, there's another HUD with and this one actually, and I don't know what the county's status on, and maybe somebody can answer this, because I looked this up, when I first got started. It's the Continuum of Care program. Is Coos County involved with this? Does anybody know?
I don't.
Okay.
Mike or Eric, can you answer that question?
I'm not aware of anything.
I can't think of, you said it's the Continuum of Care program?
Yeah.
I'll
trying to think of something, but it's not ringing a bell.
yeah, I'll have to look into it, but it's not ringing Micro Eye's memory banks here.
Okay.
Sorry, what entity did you say that was sponsored by?
That's sponsored by HUD, and it existed before COVID. And I know that it is in the state of Oregon, because I looked it up right when we all started with all of this. But right now they've got $2.3 billion, so that there's significant grant funding there. And that's just one of the HUDs. There's another HUD that's for younger people. So if we do have younger people, and you can say, too, this is how many people we have in this population under 25 in order to apply for this grant, too. So this is what I'm saying, is like piecing it together. And then there's another one that's specifically for veterans. So it's a HUD and VA grant. And then there's specific ones. Let's see. This one is, I think this one is, okay, this one supports people with mental illness, which is a lot of people in the homeless community. So there's potential for there. And there are two of those. And then, actually, no, there are 5 of those. 6, keep just scrolling down, there's 6 of those that have to do with helping people with mental illness and housing and providing services. And then we have veterans. So between mental health and homeless vets, there's there's at least 7 grants that we can apply for that.
Thanks, Alyssa. I'm going to go ahead and break in and see if Coos Health and Wellness has anything they want to say, because we do have kind of an aggressive schedule today. So I do need to make sure we get everything done.
Sure.
Eric, Mike, Kathy?
I know that we had a discussion about this earlier today. I think one of the biggest hurdles that we've found is that the 25% match that would be required through FEMA is not something that the county, I think, as a whole, either from the Coquille side or the public health side, has the capacity to find right now, and that seems to be something that we have been struggling with. How do we answer that 25%? I do know that we did find a hotel that we had discussed. City Center Hotel is for sale, apparently, as far as an option, but we are still trying to figure out what that looks like from our side from a fiscal standpoint. It seems to be a somewhat insurmountable from our view at this point, but hope to be able to figure out something long-term wise.
All right, commissioners? John? Bob?
Eric, Alyssa mentioned some grants that are available. Could the two of you talk and see if there's any way that one of those grants could be used for buying a motel, a small motel?
That is the one.
That John?
I sent that over to Alyssa. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, there are grants available to do that. Yeah, I mean, I guess we just have to make sure that the hotel or motel that we buy has enough capacity to to house all the people that we need to house. But I think that's something that we can look into for sure.
There's just so much information. I kind of got my head swirling here. It's hard to absorb it all and find a course of action here during a relatively short meeting. I'm hoping that you and Coos Health and Wellness can kind of investigate all these options and see if there is a course of action that would be timely and affordable.
Yes, and I did. I'm sorry I got it out so late because I was looking at my notes. But I did email you this document that I just put together.
Yeah, I got a chance to read
going over
it.
just a couple of different scenarios. So hopefully, maybe when you read it, it becomes more clear.
Yeah, that's good. I think ultimately we're still going to need some kind of recommendation for a way forward that is, again, timely and affordable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Alyssa. We really appreciate it. And if there's no more questions for Alyssa, I think we will move on to our next agenda item.
Thanks,
Okay,
Alyssa.
well, thank you for having me.
Right.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Thank you. All right, Nat?
The next item is just discussion with regard to scheduling the community roundtable, and it's on apparently Friday at 11 is being suggested. So I believe that's Commissioner Cribbins who put this on.
That's it. I just want to make sure it's okay with you guys to do it Friday at 11. That means we'd have to move our board meeting to noon, if you're fine with doing it. Hearing no objection, we will go ahead and just plan that.
Yes. Fair
That's
enough.
fine.
Number 3 is
All right.
a review of the United States Forest Service short stay camping policy for the Rogue Siskiyou National Forest. I sent out a email that had details on that. That was brought up by Commissioner Sweet. So, John, if you could fill us in on what you would like us to discuss with regard to that. John? Did we lose? I think maybe we lost Commissioner Sweet.
It's all right. We'll move on to the next agenda item. We can come back to it if you want.
That works for me. So, number 4 is...
Wait, maybe this is Commissioner Sweet.
John?
Commissioner Sweet? Nope.
Apparently not. So, number 4 is considering the request from Myrtle Point High School to use the county fairgrounds for a socially spaced graduation ceremony. And there was also an email that I distributed setting forth what that idea would be. And the idea involves having everyone be spread out in their cars, separated out so that obviously people aren't sharing the same space, and that each person would then walk up and receive their diploma when they were called. And apparently there would be some kind of radio transmission that everyone could listen to what was being said in the ceremony on their car radio, which actually kind of sounds like an interesting idea to me.
Could they drive up and get their diploma instead? No, I'm kidding. I'm fine.
This is John. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I was on my other phone, but all of a sudden it wasn't working. So
Could have been user error.
more than likely, although it was working earlier, I could hear you.
Huh.
So
Did you hit the mute button?
I tried it both ways, on and off. It didn't work either way. So, at any rate, I apologize for that.
That is all right. So we went past number 3, which is the Rogue Siskiyou. We'll get back to it, but right now I just brought up the Myrtle Point High School request to use the county fairgrounds for a socially spaced graduation ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we at. I just mentioned that they want to use it for that. So we're seeing if if anyone has any issues with that.
I like the idea.
I'm good.
Okay, I will pass that on. I heard from Darius and from Mike. They both approve. I haven't heard back from Aaron on the head of the fair board, but I'll talk to him here and then get back to Nanette, at the Myrtle Point superintendent. Thank you for your support.
Okay, so now going back to number 3, which is the United States Forest Service policy, John, that you forwarded to everyone, if you're still there. We'll go back to that.
I was going to say, if he hung up again.
No, I'm still here. I hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, I was going to say we're not talking about it. If
You only get 2
I kind of like
chances.
this. When I get tired of you, I can just fake that I'm not hearing anything.
Exactly.
all right, so John, what would you like us to discuss with regard to that?
I thought I'd bounce it off of you, just make sure that we were all thinking that was fine. And tell them, yes, we support your plan. Or not. Whatever your wish is. I'm in support of it.
I'm okay.
I'm good.
All right. I will pass that on to them. Thank you.
All right. So now we're going down to number 5, which was a parks update from John Sweet.
Okay. Don't need to dominate. The only thing we did differently after we talked last was to go ahead and open up the all parks except Riley for day use. The parks seemed to think they could handle that quite well. So, and we had a lot of pressure, particularly last weekend at Laverne, for people to come in and swim. They did anyway. So, just to avoid confrontation, I thought that was a good idea. Parks was okay with it, and they were. So we opened that up. I had not known or was not aware that we were as far along as we are on starting construction at the new RV site at Riley. And the parking lot there that's normally used for day use is going to be pretty well used with heavy equipment, logging operations, log loading operations, and staging rock and supplies for the project. So we did not open that up. We did get a request this morning to open up day use at Riley for the purposes of fishing in the little lake out there, and Parks is okay with that. So we'll go ahead and do that unless you have some objections. Hearing none, I assume that's okay.
Okay.
Bob and I are just going to wait and complain later.
Yeah.
It's a good strategy.
I was
That's all
really
I have.
hoping we would have the day use open because there's a lot of local people that just go to the day use, and I got calls and emails about how come we have to pay $37.50 to have a non-existent campsite to go out in the dunes. So
It's a legitimate complaint, Bob, but I just think it is a safety issue. I went out there yesterday, and that there isn't that much space there. and I think that looking at the logs, they got to drag out and buck up and load, and then the heavy equipment they'll have coming and going to do it's a pretty big project.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it just isn't going to work out. Sadly, I'm sorry for that.
Well, on the other hand, it helps out the private ones that can't go out in the dunes now anyway. So
yeah,
it's not like, we have the exclusive on going to the dunes for day use.
right.
And it put us in a bad position anyway when the Forest Service said it was okay for Riley, but they'd locked the other gates. That didn't seem right either.
No, and in my view, it wasn't. I kind of expect that we'll hear by tomorrow or late this afternoon what the Forest Service is going to do regarding the dunes. I think we all know that Oregon State Parks has opened up the parks on the south coast to day use. Just got word from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or whatever this means, that they're going to open up the viewing area at the abandoned marsh, 2 viewing areas at the abandoned marsh. So there seems to be a move afoot to open up, and I would expect U.S. Forest Service to do the same, but I can't guarantee that. And if so, that would give our dunes users a lot more access to the dunes.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for this afternoon, too. I got word on a back channel that the Forest Service was considering opening up the dunes between now and Friday.
Yeah, that's.
So I'm kind of really waiting in anticipation of that one.
So I hope that will happen. So that's all I have.
All right. Thanks, John. So the last item is just any miscellaneous topics that haven't been addressed that need to be brought up.
This is Bob. There was some chatter on Facebook and various places and some calls that the sheriff's office was out ticketing people in the dunes. Verified with the sheriff, he verified with the officers. The only ticket they gave out was for somebody who was in an area that they're not supposed to be in, whether we have shut down or not. So they got a citation. Then there was one more for doing something they weren't supposed to be doing normally. But that was it. Otherwise, they're just having nice chats with people and explaining what's going on. But they gave out 2 tickets to people who were, like I say, doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing anyway.
Okay. Anything else?
I have nothing more.
Not for me.
I have nothing else today. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.